Welcome to the Embodiment Podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with specialists from around the world. I'm your host for today, Mark Walsh. Okay, on the show today, Gayatri Schriefer. So Gayatri is into Hanna Somatics in a big way, and she'll tell us what that is. Like me, she's kind of traveling the world doing workshops, including in Brighton fairly soon, passionate about women's work, living in Sweden, and joining us today. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
I really enjoyed our sort of last private chat while I was walking down the road in Yorkshire, and I thought we should definitely have you on before you come to Brighton, which is really soon. So but I think we'll make this the sort of last chance people can have to come to Brighton when they hear this. So before we get into that, tell us about your story. How did you start with the body?
Well, I think that from an early age, I loved movement. So when I was a child, I was practicing gymnastics and I was just running around outside. And as I became older, there was this urge to move was coupled with a desire to grow spiritually. So that started in my teenage years, and then it only grew and it sort of boomed in my 20s when I went to India. And so I think my whole embodiment journey has really been about accessing spirituality through the body.
And give us some geography here then. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Sweden.
In Sweden?
Yeah.
Okay. In the north, in the south? I mean, give us some idea. We have quite a lot of Swedish.
Sort of in the south middle, like south of Stockholm. So in the countryside.
Okay. And was there like an initial urge towards the embodied or spiritual life? I mean, gymnastics and school, and this is normal, right? But what was the urge? Was it just something in you, or are you fucked up like the rest of us, or like what happened?
Probably everything. But so my parents, they were well educated, and they were both, went to school in Germany. My mother is German, my father is Swedish. And so they came to Sweden to live a simple life, to raise a family. And they had traveled the world, and that was already in the 70s. So in my childhood, there were a lot of, picture books with, photos from other cultures. And so world geography and sort of the differences of the difference of humanity was a natural part of my upbringing. So I think that's where it started, just the curiosity of other cultures, other religions, and different ways of being. And I think that is what in the end sparked this quest of my somatic practice and yoga studies and all those things, which in essence, again, I think is part of a sort of some kind of spiritual quest.
So you went to India, you studied a bunch of yoga. Give us some of the sort of pieces of your somatic journey.
Well, to India, I went first to find a guru. Like I actually moved out of home when I was 15 to go and study nature science because we lived in the forest and it was too far to travel. And I almost dropped out of school to go and explore in India, which is like crazy. I didn't know anybody who had been to India except my father. And so it went on to when I was 20, I went to India and I found a guru. And I was very devoted, and I was in an ashram and all that stuff for many years. And in the midst of that, I was practicing yoga. And I also met Brian Siddhartha Engel, and he introduced me to the book Somatics and to the practice of Somatics, which then led me on to go and study Hanna Somatics in the States.
Okay, so now we should sort of say like somatics is used as a general term, particularly in the US, for sort of any kind of conscious body-mind type practice.
Yes.
But it's also a specific lineage, which is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, so what I'm actually, if I should be more specific, which I should be, it's called Hanna Somatic Education. And the founder of that work, which I'm trained in, was Thomas Hanna. And he was a philosopher that worked with the body. And he actually reinvented the word soma, which means the living body, not just the body. So that's the difference, that he was then also coining the word somatics in the 70s, which now is used a lot, right? So when I first brought somatics to, which I still, you see, I'm calling it somatics. When I first brought Hanna somatics to Sweden, no one called, there was no somatic experiencing or all these different things. So internationally speaking, then we speak about Hanna somatic education, and we train people in somatic education.
Okay, so simple question. What is it?
What is it? Well, it's a neuromuscular re-education. So it has all to do with function, movement. It's about refining your ability to sense and move. And so improving function, refining the sensory motor feedback loop. And what it comes down to, it's a very simple and effective way of managing pain, coming out of pain, preventing injuries, and just basically becoming more fluid and flexible in not just body, but also mind. So that's where it comes into becoming a truly embodied practice.
And I mean, what's it most similar to? So reference points, probably more like Feldenkrais than yoga, right?
Well, it's funny you're asking like that. Like Yoga Journal in the States had referred to Hanna somatics as the yoga of the West. So it's based on awareness, which I think it's easy in our field to go like, what's it like, or what is it different to this and that, and what is it similar to? Then it would be Feldenkrais, because Thomas Hanna was a good friend of Moshe Feldenkrais, and he also studied with him, and he also brought him and conducted the first professional Feldenkrais training in the States in 1975. So definitely you could say that, and it's in the lineage of the Alexander technique. So you can see in Hanna somatics you have two aspects. You have the clinical hands-on work, clinical somatic education, and then you also have the group lessons. And in the Feldenkrais work, that's just the same, but it's called differently. So you can see in Hanna somatics, you can see the lineage of the passive techniques which are used in clinical work, and then Thomas Hanna's contribution of pendiculation, which is an active technique on how to lower tension levels in the muscles.
Right. And, I had a bodywork session with you in Sweden while I was visiting last, and very much enjoyed it. Thought it was very good, very gentle. It seemed like you can have, there was some activity involved. Like I wasn't just lying there totally passively. But exactly. It seemed to have some things in common with Feldenkrais that I'd experienced as well. I very much enjoyed it. So I was like, okay, this is interesting. What's going on here?
Yeah, so I think what's important about this work, and it's that it's an education. So it's not, I think the beauty of self-healing work is that it's not just a modality. It's not just a treatment, healing, but it's really teaching us how to look after ourselves. And I think that's why it's so effective. And I guess you must see that with your own trainings and your own work, that people really long for something that they can do for themselves, and not just go somewhere, feel a bit better for that day or that week, and then not have access how to really lift themselves in their life.
Yeah, I think honestly, some don't. I think some people just want to have, like when I go for a massage, I just want to lie down and have some pleasure. But I feel like,
please fix me, like.
Yeah, but it's fundamentally more useful and more empowering to be in that educational frame. And that is the main frame I use, that I inherited from Paul Linden, who says he calls himself an educator, and there's legal reasons for that in the US, but that's primarily, I say to people, I'm not a healer, I'm an educator, and that's an important distinction on my courses too.
Yeah, I use the exact same language, and in the Feldenkrais work, they're calling the students for students. In somatics, we call them
lessons,
clients, but they're definitely not patients.
Yeah, and lessons they talk about in Feldenkrais. So Are you aware that the word re-education sounds incredibly sinister in English? I don't know if it has this connotation in German or Sweden, but in English it sounds like some sort of North Korean camp, So,
it's not intended to be that. So it's, I think the focus is on learning.
Yeah, okay.
Which I think is great. So I think it's it's about a remembrance.
And there's so many somatic modalities out there. I mean, what was it about this one which really caught your imagination, which really made you go, no, I'm passionate about this. I want to, I know you like run around to Russia and all sorts of places teaching. Yeah. So what made you go, okay, I want to devote myself to this?
Yeah, well, I think in this field, it's an ongoing exploration. And if we're honest with ourselves, which I think embodied work is very honest, then we have to continue to look at ourselves and explore ourselves in different contexts. And I know you are doing that hugely, which is great. So I have tried a lot of different modalities and studied with many teachers. And I think within all of that, the somatic work has informed me. And it's just that I like it so much because it's so simple and anyone who wants can do it. And it's not the end goal, but it's a beautiful enabler. It enables me to live life more fully. It enables me to listen deeper to myself and others. So I think it's just that people have so much benefit from it in spite of me, because the work is just great on its own, because it's really addressing the nervous system within the person. So it's everything. It's like if you go to a great spiritual guru, like they're going to say, don't look at me, look inside of yourself, right? The people who say, look at me and worship me, you're going to run the other way, right? So the same with this work is that it's all about empowering the individual to take responsibility for their self-healing and providing tools to enable that. And I like anything. I mean, it's hard to make things simple, right?
Yeah, I mean, I always refine my work every year. It gets simpler and simpler, but that's not an easy process.
No, I know, but that is the beauty. So I like things that are simple and effective. So that has, what I like with the somatic work is, and I've studied a lot of the Feldenkrais work as well, because like we already covered, it is the forefather of somatic work. So it's like, it has, what would be a modality that could really apply to the masses? What do people normally want? They want to come out of pain, right?
Yeah.
So how do we teach people how to come out of pain? And in the process, while they are starting to get out of pain, while they are getting self-connected, they're starting to notice what they are doing. They're moving with more ease and comfort, and they're starting to listen to themselves. And in that process, they're suddenly starting to unravel their whole life because they're simply starting to pay attention. And it's happening because they're managing their pain. So I think it's a very sneaky, beautiful method that on whatever level you want to take it, you can. Like there's no upper limit, but there's also no must, and it's very clear in its application. And then you have the freedom, which I think is very important at any time, that the individual can always choose the level of depth that they want to take their personal transformation to.
Like my somatics, like I like my men. It's simple and gets the job done. This is good. Okay.
But no one really has the time, a regular person, maybe not like you and I, who can spend a lot of hours in embodiment,
Yeah, we're professionals, right? Like no, people can't devote the time we do, and I can't devote the time I do. So
exactly.
you know what I mean?
So it has to be, it has to be something that will give them a result that they can perceive. So it has to be, change has to be perceivable.
Yeah. Because that's motivating, right? Like it's really motivating when you do a class and you're like, oh shit, my shoulder hurt and now it doesn't, or I couldn't touch my toes and now I can. Like this observable or feelable differences. That's real motivating.
It is. And I think that's also, it's like, to me, the curious thing is always like, what will promote learning in this individual? So I work with clients, I also work with groups. And like you said, I also provide trainings internationally. So it's, for me, the curiosity is how do I support the individual, either in a group or in a client, one-on-one, to access that self-connection and learning? What is it? Is it safety? Is it connecting to comfort and ease? What is it? Is it to have that aha moment? But it's like you say, like we need to have some kind of feedback, because you cannot, Mark, somatics is great, and you're just going to say it's great because I think it's great. It's not going to work that way.
Yeah. This is the difficulty in a podcast, is people can hear about things and it might get their imagination going or pique their interest, but the truth's in the tasting. And I've seen this time and time again with people. We'll do an exercise and they'll go, wow. Yeah. I first, the first time I jumped, and the second time after the centering, I didn't. Or, Paul Linden pushed me backwards and my eyebrows raised up. Or, Paul has all these cool little demos that he does that really quickly show people some sort of effectiveness. And well, you know, they're impacted. I want to kind of underline what you said before, because it's interesting to me that people even like need certain conditions. So maybe that's like, you know, just safety or trust, or, you know, like basic trust, right? If a student doesn't come to me with that, there's very little I can do. And then we develop more trust, and that enables them to do deeper work, like on a course that might take a day or a week or whatever. And then there's the payoffs. So for me, it might be like fun, you know, or it might be like the aha moment of like, oh shit, look at that. Wow, interesting. Or it might be like, oh, that hurt and now it doesn't. Or some sort of empowerment. There's some sort of cookie, you know, some sort of banana that's given to us, you know, like that keeps us going. Because sometimes this stuff is a certain amount of work, right? Like for me to do a slow exercise for an hour, you know, it's not really where my character's at. But then I go, oh shit, that really, like now I quite like doing Feldenkrais exercises, for example, because I've had enough moments of, I've done enough Feldenkrais lessons where I've gone, oh, that changed. Oh, cool. You know, like something, I'd say at least 50% of the lessons I've done, something has really shifted for me. And that's made me motivated to do this like slow ass process.
Yes. Well, there has to be something that where we benefit of it. Why otherwise would we do it? And so that is the question. And everything is not for everyone, but I think that the somatic field and the embodied field, which I think are more or less the same, are really about self-connection and just everybody wants connection, right? To be connected to ourselves and to others and to the greater. So the question is, how do we get there? And how is that going to be supported? And how can we access that in everyday life? And how, more importantly, how can we access that when life really gets tough? Because we all know life is not just rosy. At some point, we're all going to have that realization. And it's nothing we're taught in school how to handle. No one's...
Like
you might get ill. Your parents are going to die. You are going to die. You know, you're going to have loss. You're going to have hardship. You're going to have all the other things also, hopefully. But can we fundamentally, with an embodied or a somatic practice, cultivate self-resilience? So that, I mean, I know you have spoken about this, about the comfort zone, and how do we remain in self-connection? How do we not abandon ourselves in the moment of hardship? And I think that is the essence of, that's the receipt of how is our practice really serving us? Is it just for fun? Is it for pleasure? Is it to get a kick? Or is it really applicable? And I think a true spiritual or embodied practice should deliver to some extent in those moments.
Yeah, I mean, like I was just walking this morning and a friend of mine, his mother-in-law, sorry. And I was just thinking, like, best case scenario, you bury your parents. That's like, rather than them burying you, right? Exactly. Like that's best case scenario. You get to bury your parents. Like maybe you don't even know your parents, you know, God forbid you died before them. So it's like, that's the best you can hope for as a human being. And that's not easy. And that's not an exception. It's not like a rare form of cancer. It's not like leukemia or something. That's like
everybody, hopefully, like we just said, hopefully.
Yeah.
So it's so where are we with all those things in ourselves, and where are we with death, and where are we with happiness, and what is our reference point? And that is the beauty, I think, of embodied work, that you can take these abstract or big topics and you can drizzle them down into something very tangible, sensations, and you can follow them, and you can practice to be equanimous, and you can learn to follow it, and you can learn to not have it as a static experience, but that it's fluid, it's going to shift, and you learn to have a dialogue within yourself with it. It becomes fluid and moldable instead of this rock that is threatening your life or whatever. Like, so that is what I'm interested in, how, and it's so beautiful that through such simple things, by just rolling around on the floor, we can learn to be greater human beings.
I should just say, Somatics does seem to involve quite a lot of rolling around on the floor, which has become one of my favorite things. I used to love like jumping around. Are you naked? Are you wearing any clothes? The listeners can't see this. Like, I'm like 26 days into celibacy. I need to turn my screen off, I think. I don't need this. But where was I before I was so rudely distracted by the naked Swedish girl? So we were talking about...
Not naked.
You're not? Okay, you just looked at it for a moment there.
Not all Swedes are naked.
You look totally naked. Like, oh, there is a dress there. Okay, great. I mean, I don't mind. It's your business, but I was distracting for a moment. I'm terribly sorry. Okay. So
that is funny. Like, how do we track sensation, and how do we track all these different needs that are coming up? So we have all this desire, aversion, and how do we balance that on a somatic level? How do we really not have it as a head trip, but how do we really ground it and move it through our body with the entirety of who we are? And I think as we start to do that, we really start to move through life with great ease, or with the fullness of who we are. And we may have more capacity to not be fearful in life to the same extent of what if that, what if this, or having difficulties when things evolve that are not to our expectation.
I think you just pulled that one back nicely. My somatic practice completely failed me at that moment. Yours obviously didn't. So there we go. This close. Okay, good. So just for a moment, I had it was a funny angle. I was like, so Hanna Somatics is great. You're great. I've been getting on very well with you and enjoying our conversations tremendously.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to you being in Brighton and doing 3 days. Actually, we had a thing where it wasn't selling very well because I think it was just summer, and I found this with another workshop as well. Normally we sort of fill up fairly easily, and we didn't this time. And I said, no, I really want to make this one happen. Because I want it for my own education. I'm always learning, and I had a sense this could be a good thing, having had a short experience with you online and in Sweden. And then I was like, I really want to make this one happen. So we've actually put it out there as a donation-based thing, which is really rare, but it seems like people have responded well, and we now have a decent class size. And
we have. And I think donation-based is great. I'm really happy to be coming to you and host, or to offer this work to the community. And donation-based workshops is something I've been working with for a long time. And I think it's great because I love just making the work available to everybody who wants to study it. And it's fun in Sweden because donation-based is not very common. So they really have to think about
so people go
how to handle that,
Right.
What is that? And in India, I've done a lot of retreats when I've been studying meditation, which are often donation-based. So I think that's just a wonderful way of passing on goodness into the world as a service.
Yeah, I've had mixed experiences with it, depending on the culture, the country. Because some countries just use it as a chance to take advantage, and also the personalities and how people are with that. But we've been talking about this nice flow between us and kind of wanting it to happen. And without getting too woo-woo, there does seem a way in which some events I put on flow more easily, and that had to do with the personalities of the people involved and some sense of like the different intentionality behind it. Do you know what I'm talking about? I think we were talking about this on the last phone call we had.
Yeah, but I also think that it has to do with how, Hanna Somatics is in some circles not very well known. And I think that this is also because that the founder of the work actually he died early in a car accident during the midst of his first training. So I think that it's just this work is not really as well spread as it could have been.
Where is it? I mean, so is it the institute is in California, I guess, if I'm remembering?
It is. So the director.
You went out there and trained?
I did. So I have trained with Eleanor Criswell Hanna, who was Thomas Hanna's wife. And she's a wonderful woman. She is in her 80s, and she is so intelligent, and she is a good example of what a beautiful human being is like. And together with Thomas Hanna, she was a pioneer in the 60s in the field of biofeedback and humanistic psychology. And she has done yoga since the 50s or 60s, like for ages. And so, I studied there with her.
And where is it spread to? Like, I know you're teaching in Russia. I don't know if maybe there's some teachers in the UK. I heard there's some in Ireland. Like, it doesn't seem to be as you said, like as well spread as some things. Well,
I mean, the Hanna Somatics is taught in the States by Eleanor Criswell Hanna. So we are teaching somatic education, and we are the leading organization outside of the States facilitating these trainings internationally. And the countries that we facilitate in primarily are Ireland, Sweden, and the Russian-speaking countries, and also India. So that's Russia, Belarus, Ukraine. And so it's really taken on there, which is wonderful. So we were the first embodied training to go, the first with the bodywork aspect, being invited to teach there. And so our work is Living Somatics, and I teach together with Brian Siddhartha Engel, who's the director of our organization. And so he has developed a lot of our work, and we were also coupled together for many years, and we traveled the world together and developed the work. And so he is a big part of the work as the somatic genius as he is. So so the work is continuing to spread through us and also through others.
Could we talk about the cultural piece of it? Because that we share Russia and Ukraine in common. I was just in the Ukraine a week ago, and Sweden I've been to a bunch of times. My family are from Ireland, so we've got a few countries in common here. And I'm quite curious about how somatic work lands in different places. Like when I was teaching in Sweden, people were like, "You can't make the following jokes here," you know. And I just ignored them and I got them fine. But it was there are different cultures and they're quite different. Like Sweden and Russia, like how they orientate to gender, for example, quite different. So I'd love to hear your experience on this.
Well, I think first and foremost, we went to Ukraine the first time, and having spent like over a decade in India, I would say it's halfway between Europe and Asia.
Yeah.
And it was a very beautiful experience. We had a big sports hall filled with over 30 enthusiasts. And these were like pioneers in their fields, neurologists, doctors, massage therapists, like really high-end qualified practitioners who flew in to study with us in Odessa. So I would say that the caliber of students in the Russian-speaking countries are a level higher than in Western
And this
Europe.
is what you'll see, right? Like in Russia and Ukraine, people will turn up to workshops who are doctors, surgeons, top-level physiotherapists, psychotherapists with 30 years experience. They're not kind of like some hippie just looking for a hobby.
Totally. And this is really what they have figured that this is the cutting edge of this field, and they want to get the best at what they're doing. So they want to bring this in. I have a doctor, Olga Vladi, and also Dmitry Spitsin, both in Minsk. They're both doctors. One is neurologist, and they're both working a lot with the somatic work, and they're being very,
Minsk is interesting, right? This is like this kind of like communist time warp country, like Belarus or White Russia. Many people don't know about it, but it's pretty unusual. They had a dictator since the fall of communism, right? And it's kind of like preserved, like you imagine a communist country to be. But I think it's opening up just recently.
Well, it's the most preserved country in that way, and it's. I was just in Minsk not long ago and had a beautiful time there. Have a great team there and very attentive, beautiful group of students, and the somatic community is growing there. But it's very interesting to learn more about the Russian-speaking countries. I've been to Novosibirsk, for example, which is in the...
Russia's a big place. People don't realize it's like 12 time zones. 12 time zones.
It's crazy. It's like over 300 million people, if I remember correctly.
A bit less than that, but it's certainly...
The Russian-speaking countries.
Oh, okay. All the Russians. Yeah, Ukraine and then the Latvians who speak Russian, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a whole... part of the world that I had learned very little of in school. So I have really enjoyed, and I have so many friends in these countries who are so well educated and so somatically skilled. And our top trainers are coming up now are from these countries, and it's wonderful to see how they're taking the work into their communities, to their people, and how the work is really, because life is not so easy always in these countries. I mean, you can have a hard life in any country, but as a country or a nation, I would say that there is less support system than compared to Sweden, for example. And you can see, as people start to unravel somatically, that to allow support, to learn to accept comfort, to seek comfort is even another step. So it's a beautiful process to observe and support.
Yeah, and there's a different trauma history between Sweden and Russia. There's different cultural influences, learning styles are quite different in my experience, in Sweden and Russia as well. Like my experiences, I have to teach quite differently in those two countries.
Yes.
Okay. Women's work. You talked earlier about being passionate about women's work. What does that mean?
It started when I was in my teenage years, and I actually studied women's health, and I went to Eastern Africa and did some projects around that in my late teenage years. And I actually thought I was going to do humanitarian aid work in this lifetime. And so also in India, some work with women and children and such things. And now I'm hosting women's circles. I mean, I started doing that in my early 20s in Sweden and so, but now in the Russian-speaking countries. And it's a beautiful thing when we come together as women. And it's interesting how maybe in Sweden and my circles, it's quite common, and we know how not to compete with each other and how to really be in sisterhood and support each other. And there it's like this revelation, and it's really becoming big there now as well, to join together as women and support each other.
And what does that look like? Give me some sense of what you do.
There are many ways how you can do it, but how I do it is that I ground the opening with a somatic practice, and maybe we have a theme of self-love, or how we nourish ourselves, or our visions, or whatever it's going to be, or healing of some particular topic. And then we ground it with an embodied practice around the heart or the womb or anything at all, just to get into the body. And then we continue those inquiries, and we let ourselves be filled up with nourishment so that we are overflowing and that we're not in a state of lack. And I think that is just not gender specific, but that's just how it can look when we come together as women. But I think it's fundamentally, as human beings, it's a beautiful shift when we can access overflow and abundance in our own somatic state, and where everything we do becomes an expression of that overflow.
That's very nice. Yeah, I've seen this sense of lack in regard to money with some of my students, and in regard to food in countries that have had a lot of famine. Like Ukraine, for example. And, when I've been doing work around attraction with people, I think it's one of the sort of least attractive things when people are coming from that sense of neediness and trying to get. So that sense of abundance, and, obviously the Buddhists are practicing generosity as a way of practicing that. But as you say, it's also a somatic thing, right?
Totally. And I think that has to do with that self-reliance and that trust, but it's we all have different patternings. So and that is, I think, very important to acknowledge, handle with care and respect, and that just it can have many different layers, obviously. And in the somatic work, we just work with it through physical sensations. And of course, at times you need a specialized trauma therapist, but a lot of the work we do really is addressing the whole soma, the whole mind body, by just simply moving and sensing.
And you mentioned something I've come across before, heard women talk about quite a lot, is this potential tension between either sort of sisterhood or competition.
Yeah.
So for example, even at my wife's wedding, her mother said, be careful of your friends. They might try and steal Mark, like which wasn't going to happen, right?
Like friends in that case, right?
Right, but like A, they didn't have a chance with me, but B, they weren't going to anyway. And but it was coming from this sense of competition. Or I've been in restaurants in Russia with Daria, and she's gone to the toilet, and another girl has given me their phone number, seeing that she'd just gone to the toilet. Now, that sort of slightly cutthroat mentality you'll see in certain places more than others, I've found. And I've heard of women talk about this shift from seeing other women as competition to other women as sisters.
Well, I think it has to do with what are you orienting yourself around, whether you're a man or a woman. What kind of energy are you seeking, and what are you allowing to nurture you? I mean, you were speaking about celibacy, like your celibacy training. It's like there's a reason why you are embarking on that. That is a huge thing. So it's like, are we orienting around sexual energy, or are we not? Are we looking to get fulfilled by someone's sexual appreciation, or are we having other values that we believe in ourselves? And I think that an embodied practice is a great way to surpass a lot of the bullshit, because we're just going to cultivate that just deeper wisdom and self-reliance. Like, I know my body. I know that I love it because I know how to listen to its boundaries and to its sensations, and I know how to read my sensory feedback as I start to get into a dangerous or a tricky setup. So it's like, I think it's just having a reference point in yourself just allows you to navigate life in a much smoother and more intelligent way, where maybe those things that you were just speaking about are just not a part of your experience. And of course, the cultural part of it as well, which I totally accept and acknowledge.
There's a piece here, isn't there? A few kind of interesting things you're touching on. Like, one is like self-love, and coming from that place of self-love, which can create a different interaction in the sexual sphere, but also with the, with peers, with same-sex friends or whatever. And then there's also this piece here that you're talking about being able to tune into one's own sensuality and oneself. I find it very interesting while I've been in this celibate kind of period, that I'm kind of adventure I'm having, is feeling my own kind of feminine qualities, and how do I generate that in myself, or absorb that from nature or a hot bath or whatever. And it's forcing me to do that because I'm not getting it externally in the same way. And as you say, that ability to self-regulate, and in terms of self-esteem stuff as well, like, I'm not, like, am I getting my needs, being validated by being attractive to women or sleeping with a man or whatever it happens to be? Like, there's a whole bunch of really juicy stuff here, which embodied work, I think, equips us to handle much better.
Yeah, I think it's like if you're a boat and you're just floating on the sea, and the embodied self-practice becomes your anchor that you can just put down when you need it. And it just makes us sway around a lot less. And we have a home base. We can go to our belly and we can see what are the emotions, what are the sensations, and we can decipher what it means.
So I'm slightly embarrassed by my slight freak out earlier, and I think I should explain to you, but also to listeners, like, what happened. So you're leaning forwards,
covering my shoulders. That's why.
So you're leaning forward, so it's just your face, and then you leant back, and your hair happens to be in the exact same position as the straps of your dress. So it looked very much like you were naked, and it was just a bit of a shock to me for a moment there.
Yeah.
And I hope that you didn't take any disrespect in that. It was just like, what? Like, I suddenly kind of like had a different image. So I hope you don't think that's like me stereotyping Swedish people or anything.
Not at all.
I'm going to be getting angry emails from feminists who don't understand the context, I'm sure.
Well, the thing is, we're on video. And we also know each other, so we are friendly.
Good. And how do you, the gender differences or the gender perspective differences between Sweden and Russia are quite extreme. So I'm curious how that is for you.
Yeah, it was funny because just the other week I just gave a course here in Sweden, and I had 2 assistants from Ukraine coming. And then the male assistant, Yuri, he just picked up one of the tables and carried it for the woman, a Swedish woman. She was like, wow, I wish this Swedish man would be more like this.
But she'd probably complain and sue him if he did it in Sweden. But
I just thought it was funny because, like, I went to Ukraine and Russia, and I would carry these heavy big tables, and they were like, or my own suitcase, and my manager, Nick Halikan, he would be like the organizer in the Russian-speaking countries. He would be like, Gayatri, there are different ways here. Give me your bag.
My Russian colleague, Vilya, or my wife, when I'm there with her, they never carry their own suitcases. I've got good at opening doors and helping Vilya take her coat off in the restaurant. And, and as for paying for dinner, forget about it. That's never going to, even though we're both professionals, actually, Vilya's older than me and similar levels of wealth, perhaps, there's no way she's paying for dinner. And I like it because I enjoy the the gender roles out there, and obviously it comes with a dark side too, which is, you know, best not to ignore. But
yeah, I think with some awareness we can just hold it all in awareness and gentleness, and I think it's different if we're just a victim of a stereotype that we can't have any awareness around. But if we know what we're doing, then that dance can have a certain level of sweetness to it as well. And I mean, I've studied feminism at a college. Like when I met Brian in India, I came from feminist college. He came from Bombay, like where women have to be pretty and the guys are going to have money. Like that was, I can't believe we actually managed to get together and stay together for a long time, considering very different backgrounds. Very funny.
And it does seem like there's a stereotype of Sweden, but there's also something in this, as you know, they say it's the most feminist country in the world. And in some ways, I think we've had people from Scandinavia more generally on here talking about gender stuff. And it does seem like because Sweden's been leading the way in some sense across the world, it's been in conversations longer that are just coming up in places like the States or England. Yes, no, maybe.
I think there are a lot of, aspects to that. And I could speak a lot about this. I'm more interested in the somatic work these days because it's just like what I found in, how shall I say this without getting any shit for it? I think there are ways to approach this from an embodied, awake place.
Mm-hmm.
That where it's not just black and white, and it's not just that everything, men and women are just the same and everything should be the same. No, we're not the same, but we should have the same opportunities.
Yeah.
And I think we're coming to, at the root of all that, there's a fundamental level of integrity and kindness that are extended to all humans, regardless of gender, and we can take it further into other species like animals and so on. So we are speaking more, where I'm coming from now is I'm looking at it from a place of wholeness, from a place of so I'm not in that pain of, women, or I'm abused, I'm a woman, like I don't I'm not treated right by society and all these different. That was a phase that I had to go through, and and I don't disregard the state of the world, but I'm also choosing to not suffer by it. I'm aware of it, but I'm choosing a different perspective because we have that power. We can say, I'm not rooted in pain. I'm rooted in awareness, but I'm rooting for love, and I'm rooting for consciousness. Yeah,
I mean, finished. You highlighted sort of two interesting things. I think one is like equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome, right? And it's interesting that Sweden's had the most equality of opportunity of any kind of country around gender by all the measures. But actually, it's not like Sweden now has 50%, female coal miners or 50% male nurses, or that's quite the opposite has actually happened in Sweden, which is really interesting to me. The opposite is what we expect has happened. When given equal opportunities, the outcomes actually differ more, and that's kind of surprising data.
I think it's interesting that I think when we really attune to it, it's like we are not the same, and we don't really want the same treatment. I think like we want to have the same opportunity, but you were speaking about accessing your feminine elements or aspects. I think where my study has taken me now it's from the fight into the internal inquiry of energies, of internal energies, of yin yang, of female male energies, of different elements, that how can I attune them within myself? And as they become more harmonized, as I become more harmonized, I have less of an external struggle with these things.
I see as you're talking about you coming from kindness and people going through the necessary trauma healing or that kind of stage of being angry. This is where I say Sweden can be ahead of some of the rest of the world. It seems like the leading edge women I know in Sweden, like we had my friend Lynn Holmquist on, for example, on the podcast, and I've met a bunch of really developed somatic women out there. And those who have sort of done the somatic work end up actually being really feminine and really male friendly and kind of radiant. And they've passed through this kind of hard, angry stage into something else. Like, I regard you as a peer. I treat you with respect. I hope, I'm inviting you to come and teach for a reason in England. And yet, you also have that kind of feminine quality, which I love. And it's just nice to see that reemerge. And I see that not so much in the mainstream in Sweden, but in the lead edge of a lot of the people that I'm hanging out with. So I'm like, okay, if that's a sign of what's to come in Britain and America, great. Let's keep hanging in there.
I think that may have more to do with the kind of women that are just inquiring into that balance that I was just speaking about. I think it's just really receiving oneself for what we are, and everybody have their own expressions with that. And I think that's the beauty of the work you and I are doing, and so many others, is that the point of it is to facilitate a playground or an exploration ground or tools for everyone who wants to come and get to know themselves better and to self-connect and learn and grow and develop and see. So Thomas Hanna, he really wanted freedom for humanity, physical and intellectual freedom. And I think that the embodied field, I mean, he coined the term somatics like in the 70s, like that's 50 years ago. Like, come on, like, and here we are. And I think it's happening. I think this is the time in the world where this is the medicine the world needs. It's self-connection, is living and growing in self-connection, because when we're listening to ourselves, and we're also able to perceive others. And that is peace, isn't it? That is the foundation of peace. And the world needs peace. And I think that is, the world has never been more ready for the work we're doing than now.
It is interesting that while this stuff was happening in Esalen in the late 60s and the 70s, and maybe, Moshe Feldenkrais was coming over and terms like somatics were being coined, I don't think the world was really ready for it then. There was particularly in some places there, but not in most of the world. And I look at the popularity
ahead of their time. I mean, Bay Area and like other areas, it was really happening. New York and
now I see like the popularity of, say, the conference or the podcast, and I go, okay, and yoga becoming so popular and yoga opening up what yoga actually is. I got interviewed earlier today as a guest on a yoga podcast, and they were asking about all sorts of somatic stuff, and they clearly had an awareness of different disciplines, and there was a questioning of the sort of Iyengar or guru methods and all these sort of things. And it was like, okay, wow, something's really shifting right now. And we live in this time of, I don't know how it is in Sweden, but in Britain and America, there's kind of chaos, a time of turbulence and chaos, and no one knows what's true and what's fake news, and deep cynicism and continual change at the kind of rapid level. And is Brexit happening? Isn't? And Trump and all the rest of it. But then that's easy to get hard in the face of that, or cynical. But actually, I'm also seeing a real opportunity. I'm seeing a real opening to some of these things.
I believe there is. I think people are in the midst of the madness. I think many people see there is no other way to turn but inside. And I think that it's people they have a choice. We have the internet now. There's so much information out there. I mean, your podcast, the conference was so easily accessible that people are finding so many keys. There are ways, there are communities to connect with across the globe because of the internet.
Right. It's beautiful. I think it's the best time ever to be alive. That some random guy can sit in his little room in Brighton and be, talking to someone in Sweden, and we're going to send this to thousands of people. It's going to be up on the internet.
I think this is wonderful.
Just getting 20 people in a room for a training can be hard work, but getting like 2,000 people to listen to a podcast is relatively easy. So
and I love that. And that is just, I think that's just phenomenal how this wealth of knowledge can be accumulated and inspiring so many. And I think also with the embodied work, it's, even though it's always first person based, it's so important to connect to a community and to get inspiration, I think, to widen our thinking and our perception, and connect. I think simply connect.
Here's an example. Like last night, I posted something about trauma. It got shared by Christopher Wallace, who's a tantric yogic scholar in Boulder, Colorado. One of his students or friends in California said, "Oh, you've missed the NAM technique." And I said, "What's the NAM technique?" He said, "It's brilliant. You should look at it." I went on YouTube, found a video, which I've been watching in the bath last night, found a podcast, which I listened to today. And tonight I'm probably going to send an email to the founder saying, "Do you ever come to England and do you want to come on my podcast?" And this is less than 24 hours. And it's like an entirely other kind of trauma therapy I've been looking into. I'm just giving that as like one example of these kind of little flows that happen 1,000 times a day, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, and you're doing a really great job with just connecting everybody and deciphering all the stuff that is out there, because now it's really a jungle. Like we just spoke about the word somatics in the beginning, like it's used so widely and wildly too.
Embodied's getting even more wildly used. Embodied plumbing, embodied this, embodied that. I've seen embodied everything recently.
Exactly. So I think you're doing a great job in just deciphering everything and putting it all together. And I think that's just beautifully done with the
What I'm trying to do is get the big picture. You know, there's people who are much better German teachers than I am, but I'm trying to get a sense of the breadth of this work and connect everyone. Everyone's either going to be my friend or in some kind of Mark Walsh hate group pretty soon, you know, who's in this field. So either way, they'll be connected. It's fine. And
even ultimately, we all gather around what really matters, which is just facilitating platforms for transformation. And I think anybody who can join around that, and personalities or likes or dislikes are not really a part of it so much. And I think it's just about how to get it to the masses and how to make it accessible.
Yeah, I mean, that's my life's work. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I totally hear you. And I think that's why we connect so well. It's because we have that same passion. My life's work is also to make embodiment available, except I use the name Somatics. How to really give people the gift of having tools so that they can live a great life, that they can have a purposeful life, that they have a choice, that they're not slaves of their thoughts and their emotions and their circumstances, but how can we find the freedom within ourselves regardless? And I think that is the beauty of embodied work. And I'm grateful for the work you're doing. And I think it's a real beautiful thing to make embodied work accessible to everyone. So thank you.
You're so welcome. I love how passionately and eloquently you speak about this. Really inspiring. So I'm looking forward to seeing you in Brighton very soon. So the date let's get this
23rd to 25th, I think, like the Friday to the Sunday.
Yeah, so this is going to be coming out as soon as possible, and by the time this comes out, we'll probably make it the last day to book. So we get it out by the end of the week, best case scenario. So it's pretty short notice, but it's the 23rd, 24th, and 25th of August. So like now. And it's in Brighton at the Studio, which is a gorgeous venue, just my favorite place in the world to teach. And it's by donation, and you can find the details on the website as ever, embodiedfacilitator.com. So I'm going to ask my people to push this out as quick as possible so people can see that. And maybe if they missed you this time, we'll maybe another time in the future if it goes well.
Yeah.
So,
what we can say about it is that it's going to be a combination between movement lessons and clinical hands-on work. And it's all going to be about learning how to assess different habituations in the somatic state. So what does it look physically, and how do we notice it, and what does it feel like when we're in it, and how do we come out of it? So it's a very practically oriented workshop. The specific clinical elements that I'm going to teach, I'm going to base on the participants, depending on what their ailments are and what they would like to see and what they would like to learn. But the foundation is to give a real solid understanding of what somatic work is about, and to give practical, applicable techniques how to come out of these habituations.
Boom, you are a pro. You are a pro. So thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll see you in Brighton very soon.
Thank you, Mark. It was a real treat to be on this show. Thank you.
Some ways to get more, to give back, and to get more involved now. So the biggest request I have would be to share the podcast with your friends, people that you think would really enjoy it. Email it to them, put it on your social media, tell them about it, old school. Really appreciate that. Equally, if you want to support us financially, you can go to Patreon. That's patreon.com/embodiment podcast and give us $1 an episode. And I'd say they're well worth $1. So that's less than £1 if you're in UK-ish. So yeah, please go there. On the embodiedfacilitator.com website is where this is hosted. If you're, most people I think listen to for iTunes. iTunes, we'd certainly appreciate a review. The way iTunes works means that a review means more people will find it. iTunes regards it as more important for searches. So even a couple of sentences review really does help as a little thank you to us. And if you want to go to embodiedfacilitator.com, you can see the actual, links to the sites. There's comments on there. The Facebook group tends to be where people discuss things. So if you go to put in the Embodiment Podcast into Facebook, there's a page which is relatively quiet and a group which does have some discussion on. So I will reply to things personally there. So also on embodiedfacilitator.com website, there's all sorts of freebies there. There's videos, there's free ebooks, there's ebooks you can buy. And of course, there's our newsletter list. If you want to stay in touch and learn about things like the Embodied Facilitator course and our next Embodied Yoga Principles teacher training, then go to that website and you'll see a little pop-up and you can get the newsletter through there. Okay, so I think they're the main ones. Tell your friends, pay us some money on Patreon, give us a review on iTunes, send us your email if you want to be on the newsletter list, and get involved on the Facebook there. Bit long. Pick whatever you like that works for you. Until next time, welcome home to the body.